The rain had been falling for 3 days straight across Cedar Valley, turning the October roads into slick ribbons of asphalt that reflected the grey sky. Tommy Chen stood outside St. Mary's Hospital, a small figure barely visible through the downpour, clutching his father's motorcycle helmet against his chest. The boy was 8 years old, soaked to the bone, and he hadn't moved from that spot in over an hour. Inside, his father David lay in intensive care following a collision with a drunk driver on Route 47. The impact had sent David's Harley sliding across 2 lanes before he'd been thrown into a guardrail. The prognosis was uncertain: multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a traumatic brain injury that had the doctors speaking in careful, measured tones. Tommy's mother had died 2 years earlier from cancer. David was all he had left, and the boy had heard enough whispered conversations between nurses to understand what critical condition meant. So he stood in the rain, holding that helmet like a talisman, as if his vigil could somehow anchor his father to this world. Maria Santos noticed him first. She'd been visiting her own father, a retired veteran recovering from hip surgery, when she spotted the small figure through the lobby windows. She grabbed an umbrella from the stand and pushed through the revolving doors. "Sweetheart, you're going to catch pneumonia out here," she said gently, holding the umbrella over him. Tommy looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I have to stay. Dad always says a rider never leaves another rider behind." Maria's throat tightened. She recognized the helmet. The distinctive eagle decal marked David as a member of the Iron Valley Motorcycle Club, a group known throughout the county for their charity rides and community fundraisers. She'd seen them escort children to school, deliver toys at Christmas, and raise thousands for the local food bank. "Does your club know?" she asked softly. Tommy shook his head. "Dad's phone got smashed in the accident. I don't know how to reach them." Maria pulled out her own phone. "What's the club called?" "Iron Valley MC. The president is Mr. Marcus Webb." It took Maria 15 minutes of searching and calling before she reached the shop where Marcus worked as a master mechanic. When she explained the situation, there was a long silence on the other end. "We'll be there," Marcus said simply. "Tell Tommy we're coming." Within an hour, the parking lot began to fill with the deep rumble of motorcycle engines. They arrived in pairs and small groups, cutting through the rain with headlights piercing the gloom. Marcus led the pack on his Road King, followed by the club's road captain, James Big Jim Martinez, and Sergeant-at-Arms, Patricia Trish O'Connell. They parked in formation, the bikes creating neat rows despite the weather. Riders dismounted, their leather cuts darkened by rain, patches bearing the club's name and the words, "Respect," "Loyalty," "Brotherhood" clearly visible. They weren't the stereotype. Among them were teachers, nurses, construction workers, a retired judge, and a social worker. Ages ranged from 25 to 73. Marcus approached Tommy, who still clutched the helmet. The club president was a bear of a man with silver streaking his beard, but his eyes were gentle as he knelt in the puddle forming around the boy's feet. "Your dad's one of our best," Marcus said. "That means your family too. You're not standing out here alone anymore." He stood and addressed the gathered riders. "We set up a rotation. 2 members stay with Tommy at all times. The rest we go inside, find out what David needs, what Tommy needs, and we make sure both of them know they're not alone. Jim, coordinate with the hospital administration. Trish, reach out to our legal contact. I want to know about the driver who hit David and what charges are pending." The hospital staff initially balked at the influx of leather-clad visitors, but Marcus handled it with calm professionalism. He explained they weren't there to cause disruption. They simply wanted to support one of their own and ensure a frightened child wasn't left to face this crisis alone. The hospital social worker, Linda Brennan, saw Tommy's condition and immediately intervened to find him dry clothes and a warm meal. By evening, the waiting room had transformed. Riders took shifts, always maintaining a presence. Some brought food, not just for themselves but for other families in the waiting area, many of whom had been surviving on vending machine coffee and stale sandwiches. Others organized a collection to cover Tommy's immediate needs and any medical expenses David's insurance wouldn't cover. The local news picked up the story when a reporter noticed the motorcycle convoy. She approached Marcus cautiously, expecting the usual tough guy posturing she'd seen in movies. Instead, she found an articulate man who spoke passionately about community responsibility. "We're not a gang, we're a club," Marcus explained to the camera. "We ride together, yes, but more importantly, we look out for each other and our community. David Chen is our brother, and that little boy is now under our protection. We'll be here as long as they need us." Chapter 2. The Rally. By the third day, word had spread far beyond Cedar Valley. Social media amplified the story of the boy in the rain and the bikers who answered his silent call for help. Messages poured in from motorcycle clubs across 3 states, not just asking for updates, but asking how they could help. Marcus sat in the hospital cafeteria with his officers, planning their next steps. David's condition had stabilized, but remained serious. He'd regained consciousness briefly, long enough to ask about Tommy, before slipping back into medicated sleep. The doctors said recovery would be long and uncertain, possibly requiring months of rehabilitation. "We've got a bigger problem," Trish said, sliding a folder across the table. "The driver who hit David, Richard Holbrook, he's a repeat offender, 3rd DUI, but his family has money and connections. His lawyer's already working on a plea deal that would mean minimal jail time." Jim's jaw clenched. "How is that possible?" "Happens all the time," Trish replied. She worked as a paralegal during the day and knew the system's flaws intimately. "But I've been talking to Sandra Morrison. She's a prosecutor in the DA's office and owes me a favor. If we can demonstrate community impact and support David through the legal process, it strengthens the case for serious charges." Marcus nodded slowly. "We do it right. No intimidation, no threats. We show up. We follow procedure, and we let the system work. But we make damn sure the system knows we're watching." The conversation was interrupted by Linda Brennan, the hospital social worker. She approached their table with a worried expression. "I need to talk to you about Tommy," she said, sitting down without invitation. "Child Protective Services has been notified. With David incapacitated and no immediate family, they're considering temporary foster placement." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "That boy doesn't need to be torn away from his father right now." Linda held up her hands. "I agree, which is why I'm here. I've been working on an alternative. There's a provision for kinship care that extends to close family friends and community members. If someone from your club, someone with a clean background check and appropriate living situation, could serve as temporary guardian, Tommy could stay in Cedar Valley, visit his father daily, and maintain stability." The 3 officers exchanged glances. Marcus spoke first. "I've got a spare room. My wife Rachel teaches elementary school. She'd be good with him. We've both got clean records." "I'll get the paperwork started," Linda said, "but there's a court hearing in 5 days. You'll need character references, home inspection, the works, and CPS will be scrutinizing everything because of the Motorcycle Club Association." "Let them scrutinize," Jim said. "We've got nothing to hide." Word of the custody situation spread through the club quickly. Members mobilized with the same efficiency they brought to organizing charity rides. Rachel Webb met with Tommy's school, ensuring his teachers understood the situation and could provide supportive testimony. Other members reached out to local business owners, clergy, and community leaders, building a network of references that painted a clear picture of the Iron Valley MC's genuine community involvement. The news coverage intensified. What had started as a human interest story evolved into something larger, a conversation about community, support systems, and how ordinary people respond to crisis. Donations flooded in, not just for David's medical expenses, but for Tommy's long-term care. On the 4th day, Marcus received a call from Elena Rodriguez, president of the Desert Storm Riders in Arizona, a club composed entirely of military veterans. "We're organizing a solidarity ride," Elena said. 12 clubs so far, maybe 250 riders. We're calling it the Guardian Run. We ride to Cedar Valley, show support for David, and attend the custody hearing if you'll have us." Marcus felt his throat tighten. That's a long ride in uncertain weather. "We're riders," Elena said simply. "Weather's just scenery. Besides, one of ours is down. That matters more than comfort. We'll be there Saturday morning." Marcus shared the news with the club that evening. The response was unanimous. They'd welcome the support, but they needed to ensure it didn't backfire. The last thing they needed was for a judge to see hundreds of bikers and decide Tommy needed protection from that environment. Trish took charge of coordination. She drafted guidelines: respectful courthouse attire, no aggressive behavior, strict adherence to all traffic laws during the ride, and designated spokespeople to handle any media inquiries. They would demonstrate discipline and community respect, not intimidation. Chapter 3. The Guardian Run. Saturday morning broke clear and cold, the rain finally exhausted. Tommy was staying with Marcus and Rachel, sleeping in a room they'd quickly furnished with donations from club members. The boy had been quiet, processing everything with the stoic acceptance of a child who'd already experienced too much loss. Rachel made pancakes while Marcus helped Tommy into a warm jacket. Through the kitchen window, they could already hear the distant rumble of engines. "They're coming for Dad," Tommy said, a statement rather than a question. "They're coming for both of you," Rachel corrected gently. "You're part of this family now, Tommy. That's what today is about." The gathering point was Veterans Memorial Park on the edge of town. Marcus and Jim arrived early to find Elena Rodriguez already there, her Desert Storm riders forming up in precise military formation. More clubs arrived in waves: the Rolling Thunder chapter from Montana, the Fallen Angels from Colorado, the Iron Cross from Wyoming, and nearly a dozen others. Each club maintained its own identity while respecting the unified purpose. By 9 o'clock, 250 motorcycles filled the park and surrounding streets. The sound was thunderous, a symphony of different engines creating a collective roar that vibrated through the morning air. But there was order to the apparent chaos. Road captains coordinated positions, ensuring safe distances and proper formation. The local police department, initially concerned about managing such a large group, found themselves working with experienced riders who understood traffic coordination better than most civilian drivers. Chief Robert Hayes, himself a former rider, met with Marcus and Elena to review the route. "I've never seen anything like this," Hayes admitted, "but I'm impressed by the organization. We'll provide escort, keep intersections clear." "Appreciate that, Chief," Marcus said. "We're not here to disrupt. We're here to support." The ride through Cedar Valley was spectacular. The procession moved at a steady pace, two abreast, engines rumbling in synchronized rhythm. Residents lined the streets, some holding signs of support, others simply watching in awe. The courthouse square had been their destination, but Marcus made a detour. They rode past St. Mary's Hospital first. The route took them directly under David's ICU window. Eleanor had coordinated with hospital staff, and nurses wheeled David's bed close to the window. He was awake, barely, but conscious enough to see the river of motorcycles flowing past, each rider raising a fist in salute as they passed. Tommy stood at the window with his father, tears streaming down his face. David's hand, heavily bandaged, squeezed his son's fingers weakly. "That's family," David whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube he'd only recently had removed. "That's what it means." From the hospital, the procession continued to the courthouse. They parked with military precision, filling every legal space and then some. The riders dismounted, many removing their leather cuts to reveal dress shirts and slacks underneath. They'd come prepared to show respect for the legal proceedings. The courthouse staff had been warned, but were still overwhelmed by the sheer number of people filing into the building. Judge Patricia Thornton's courtroom could hold maybe 100 people comfortably. Easily twice that number tried to enter. The judge's bailiff, a veteran named Tom Wilson, took one look at the crowd and made an executive decision. "We're moving this to the assembly hall," he announced. "Judge's orders. Everyone will have a chance to be present." The custody hearing was technically a preliminary review to determine temporary guardianship arrangements. The CPS representative, a young caseworker named Brian Fletcher, presented his assessment. He acknowledged Marcus Webb's clean background, stable home, and genuine relationship with Tommy, but expressed concern about the motorcycle club lifestyle and whether it provided appropriate stability for a traumatized child. Then Judge Thornton asked if there were character witnesses. What followed was extraordinary. One by one, members of the community stood to speak. Tommy's school principal described how club members had volunteered for school safety programs. A local pastor talked about the Iron Valley MC's consistent support for the community food bank. The owner of a women's shelter detailed how the club had installed security systems and provided self-defense classes free of charge. Elena Rodriguez stood as well, introducing herself not just as a club president but as a retired Army colonel with 30 years of service. "Your Honor, I don't know Marcus Webb personally," she said. "I rode 600 miles to be here because of what he represents. The motorcycle community is not what popular media portrays. We're veterans, teachers, first responders, business owners. We value discipline, respect and loyalty. This young man is facing the worst crisis of his life. He needs stability, yes, but he also needs to understand that he's not alone, that community means something, that people show up when it matters. I've seen combat, Judge, and I've seen how men and women respond under pressure. The people in this room have demonstrated more character and community commitment than many organizations 10 times their size." The judge listened to 2 hours of testimony. She asked Tommy questions directly, establishing that the boy wanted to stay with Marcus and Rachel, that he felt safe and supported, and that he understood his father was receiving the best possible care. Finally, Judge Thornton made her ruling. Temporary guardianship is granted to Marcus and Rachel Webb, with regular reviews and full cooperation with CPS oversight. "Mr. Fletcher, I want weekly reports on Tommy's welfare, but I'm also instructing you to observe rather than assume. This court recognizes that family takes many forms, and community support is a strength, not a liability." The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration, no cheering but widespread relief visible on every face. Tommy hugged Marcus tightly, finally allowing himself to cry properly. Chapter 4. The Long Road. The custody hearing was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the motorcycle community's support proved essential in ways no one had initially anticipated. David's recovery was slower and more complicated than doctors had hoped. He underwent 3 additional surgeries to address internal injuries and would need extensive physical therapy. The financial burden would have been crushing for a single father with modest savings. The initial fundraising had covered immediate expenses, but long-term care, rehabilitation, and Tommy's ongoing needs required sustained support. The club stepped in with practical solutions. Jim Martinez, who managed a construction company, restructured his workforce to create a part-time position David could fill from home during recovery. Administrative work, project coordination, anything that didn't require physical labor. Other members organized a rotating schedule to drive Tommy to school, attend his soccer games, and maintain normalcy in his life. The legal situation developed as well. Richard Holbrook's attorney attempted to negotiate a plea deal that would have resulted in a suspended sentence and probation. Trish O'Connell attended every court hearing, taking meticulous notes and coordinating with the prosecutor's office. The presence of community members at each proceeding sent a clear message. This case mattered, and people were watching. The breakthrough came when a witness emerged, a truck driver who'd been on Route 47 the night of the accident and had dashcam footage showing Holbrook swerving across lanes minutes before the collision. Combined with toxicology reports showing a blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit, the evidence was damning. The prosecutor, Sandra Morrison, pushed for serious charges: vehicular assault, DUI and endangerment. The judge, unwilling to let wealth shield consequences, agreed. Holbrook received a 4-year prison sentence and permanent license revocation. Not perfect justice, but more accountability than typical in similar cases. David was present for the sentencing, still using a wheelchair but determined to face the man who'd nearly killed him. Tommy sat beside him, Marcus and Rachel flanking the boy protectively. When the sentence was read, David simply nodded. He'd told Marcus earlier that anger wouldn't heal his body or raise his son. He just needed to know that recklessness had consequences. The real story, though, was about rebuilding. By December, David had progressed enough to move back home with Tommy, though he still needed assistance. The club organized a modified schedule where members checked in daily, helped with household tasks, and ensured both father and son had support without being smothered. Rachel Webb, who'd grown deeply attached to Tommy during his stay, continued her involvement. She tutored him twice a week, helped him with school projects and provided a maternal presence the boy desperately needed. The relationship evolved naturally into something like extended family. The Webbs became Aunt Rachel and Uncle Marcus, rather than temporary guardians. Christmas arrived with a club tradition that took on special meaning that year. The Iron Valley MC organized its annual toy drive, but this time they dedicated it to David's recovery. A charity ride on Christmas Eve brought together over 300 motorcycles from clubs across the region. They rode through Cedar Valley at dusk, headlights creating a river of light through the early winter darkness, before converging at Veterans Memorial Park. Tommy and David attended, both bundled against the cold. David still couldn't ride. That would take months more of recovery. But he stood with his son watching the assembled riders and felt something he hadn't experienced since the accident: hope. Marcus presented them with a new helmet for Tommy, sized for a child but bearing the Iron Valley patch. "For when you're old enough," he explained, "because you're already one of us." The news coverage that had started with a boy in the rain had followed the story through its resolution. The reporter, Jennifer Wu, had done a feature series documenting David's recovery, the custody proceedings, and the community response. Her final piece aired on Christmas Day, titled "When Community Means More Than Words." In it, she interviewed residents who'd witnessed the Guardian Run, teachers who'd seen Tommy's resilience, and medical staff who'd watched the motorcycle club's steady presence throughout David's hospitalization. The piece concluded with David and Tommy at home, surrounded by their extended club family, sharing a meal together. "People see the leather and the motorcycles and they make assumptions," David said to the camera. "But this community saved my son from being lost in a broken system. They showed him that family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when you need them most. That's worth more than anything." By spring, David had recovered enough to return to limited riding. His first trip back on a motorcycle was a short run, just 20 miles through the valley with Marcus and a small group. Tommy rode in a specially adapted sidecar, grinning as the wind rushed past, his small hand raised in the traditional biker wave to every rider they passed. The community that had rallied around a boy in the rain had become something more permanent, a network of support that extended beyond crisis. Elena Rodriguez's Desert Storm Riders established a partnership with Iron Valley MC for annual charity events. Other clubs that had participated in the Guardian Run maintained connections, creating a regional coalition focused on community service and mutual support. Tommy, for his part, became something of a mascot within the motorcycle community. He attended club meetings with his father, helped organize charity events, and wrote an essay for school about family that won a regional competition. In it, he described standing in the rain with his father's helmet, feeling alone, and then hearing the rumble of engines approaching, the sound of family coming home.